Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone, back here again today with another episode of After the Buzzer, the show where I recap the NBA games from the night. And we're once again talking Western Conference Finals. Game 3 just wrapped up as I'm recording this. And so far throughout this series, it's been very lopsided. Minnesota lost the first two games at home, which I really did not expect. I thought either team could win this series, but ultimately I picked Minnesota in 7. I thought it was going to be a lengthy 6-7 game matchup, but the Mavericks just very easily looked like the better team through the first two games. They were close games, but Dallas always seemed to outclass the Timberwolves in the final few moments. And going into Game 3 now on the road for the Timberwolves, this is a must-win. No team has ever come back from being down 0-3 in a playoff series. I feel like it'll happen at some point, but history said so far it's an unrecoverable deficit. So the Timberwolves season is on the line going into Game 3, and for a majority of the night, it didn't look good. The Mavericks had a pretty substantial lead for a lot of the first half into the third quarter, even for the first half of it at least. They led by as much as 12. They were up by 10. And then Minnesota started to come back a little bit, mainly because Anthony Edwards really started to get into his bag. He got aggressive. He was knocking down some of the tough shots he usually hits. Cat started to hit some shots, and it felt like the offense was coming to life a little bit for the Timberwolves. They even took a lead, and the Mavericks were seemingly fading away. But despite Minnesota's best efforts, we once again got to the final moments, and as usual, it was Dallas who came out on top because Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic are two of the best closers in the sport. I tweeted this out. You can do a lot of things right. You can play nearly perfect defense like a lot of the Timberwolves players did on an island. You could argue they should send Devils out there more like OKC did, but at least in terms of single coverage, which has been their scheme against the Stars, even when they're getting mismatches, guys are playing really good defense. It just doesn't matter because Kyrie and Luka aren't going to miss a lot of shots. They're able to hit some of the toughest buckets out of anybody in the league. They can create for themselves, create for others with the advantages they make going downhill or just the pressure they command, and it was enough for the Mavericks to go ahead and get the win, moving up 3-0, something that I really did not see coming. Credit to the Mavericks, they've really found a way to take control of the series, and it was everybody tonight. Mainly, as usual, Luka and Kyrie both had 33 points. Luka had 7 rebounds, 5 assists, 5 steals, 5 of 11 shooting. Kyrie had 33 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists, and a steal on 60% shooting overall, 3 of 6 from downtown. They're one of the most talented backcourts I've ever seen. I'm seeing a lot of people say the most talented or the best offensively or whatever you want to say. I don't know if I'm quite there yet just because we've had some all-time great backcourts. I mean, I think of Steph and Clay right off the bat having won a number of championships together, but they're certainly in that argument. They are so good at playing off of each other. This was the vision that always seemed to be there when they traded for Kyrie, and they did a great job of putting the supporting pieces around them to let them thrive. I mean, PJ Washington, 5 of 10 in this game for 16 points, playing some good defense. Derek Jones Jr., 11 points, 3 of 3 from 3. He's been a revelation for them, has really earned himself a big contract this offseason. Derek Lively only unfortunately played 9 minutes. He took a knee to the back of the head at one point. He's questionable right now for Game 4. Hopefully everything's okay with him, but he's just been a monster all throughout this series. Gafford stepped up late in this one after the Lively injury, finished with only 5 points, but he had 3 rebounds, 3 blocks, and caught a lob that was kind of the dagger in this game. 2 of 4 from Jaden Hardy, 1 of 1 from Josh Green. It was just a great two-way effort from the Mavericks, who have become known for that, and now they're just one win away from making their first NBA final since 2011. I really did not think they were going to dominate the series quite like this. I thought there was a good chance that they won this one. It was really a coin flip in my eyes, but the Mavericks have just kind of stonewalled anything that the Timberwolves have tried to get going, which brings me to what I really want to focus on in this video, because I've talked a lot over the past couple of videos covering this series about how great the Mavericks are. Now I need to talk a little bit about some guys that are struggling, and one player in particular in Karl-Anthony Towns, who has really been the biggest disappointment of this entire series so far. Cat has always been a very polarizing player with this franchise, especially as of late since they've gotten more and more competitive. There have been a lot of questions surrounding whether or not Cat can be a big-time contributor on this team as they try and compete for a championship. Mainly because over the past few years, every time the Wolves have made the playoffs, Cat has been pretty disappointing, has not often had any big playoff moments. Despite being a great regular season player, if the Wolves wanted any chance this year of going far into the playoffs, they were going to need him to step up a lot on both ends, and all throughout the year he's done exactly that, but the playoffs are a different animal, and through the first few series, the first 2 series that is, against Denver and Phoenix, Cat was really good. There were some moments where he wasn't the best, but he did enough to get them over the hump. Against Phoenix, stepped up great defensively, had some moments guarding Kevin Durant, knocked down a lot of big-time shots for them. Against Denver in Game 7, he was their best player. He was the guy that lifted them over the top when Anthony Edwards was struggling, and that's so huge for both him and this team because all season it was the defense that really carried them, and the biggest question mark about whether or not they could make it far in the playoffs was if the offense could hold up. We knew Anthony Edwards was probably going to be pretty good. understood that they had some solid supporting pieces around him, like Jaden McDaniels and Mike Conley, but they were going to need Cat to be a 20-point per game scorer, do it efficiently, and also hold up defensively. A lot to ask from him if they were going to make this run, and he did it for the first two series. It seemed like he was putting all the narratives away. People saying that he and Gobert couldn't coexist, that Cat could actually be a big-time playoff performer, and I still do think those things are true, but I've started to question them a little bit more here against the Dallas Mavericks, because he's currently having one of the worst Western Conference Finals that any star player has ever had. If you don't believe me, his stats so far are 15 points, 8.3 rebounds, and 2.7 assists through the first three games. And specifically here in game 3, Cat had 14 points, 11 rebounds, and shot 5 of 18, including 0 of 8 from 3, as this guy was one of the best big man shooters of all time. I know at one point he said he was, and everybody got angry about that. Cat certainly has an argument for being the best three-point shooting big ever, and now he can't buy a three. In fact, so far through the first 3 games of this series, Cat has a true shooting percentage of 37.4, which is the 5th worst in the three-point era by any player that's ever put up at least 50 shots in conference finals history. That is abysmal. Like, take a look at some of these shooting numbers. He was 2 of 9 from 3, 6 of 20 from the floor in game 1, 4 of 16 from the floor in game 2, 1 of 5 from 3, 0 of 8, like I said last night. On the series as a whole, he is 3, 4, 22 from downtown. That's nowhere near going to get it done if you're the Timberwolves. And the crazy thing is, like, they have gotten really close in all 3 of these games, despite this big-time struggle from Cat, because like last night, Ant had his best game. Naz Reid has been maybe their best player. Mike Conley has had some big moments. Jaden McDaniels has been pretty good. Like, so many other guys have stepped up. If Cat was just playing at his usual level like he did for the first 2 playoff series, the Wolves could very well be up 2-1 or even 3-0 at this point. Of course, he's not the only problem. There are a lot of other issues. There are some defensive scheme problems, like game 1, the drop coverage they ran a lot just got torched, and the fact that the Mavericks are just a really good team. It's not all Cat's fault that they're losing this series, but he so far has been the biggest disappointment. I was really hoping this could be a matchup where he could really thrive. It felt like he had a good chance to go ahead and build off of that game 7. That to me felt like it might be a turning point for Cat in his playoff career, and instead he's followed it up with his worst series ever. On top of all this, you also have the fact that in game 2, Cat got benched down the stretch of the game in favor of Naz Reid, who's playing his butt off. He was maybe their best player in that game, so it makes sense they finish with him. But you're paying Cat right now $36 million, and by the end of his contract, you're going to be paying him around $60 million to be the second guy for this team, which is where some of the bigger concerns surrounding the Timberwolves come in, because here on this big stage, I mean, coming into this series, it felt like, okay, Cat and this Wolves team have proved that this situation that they put themselves in, this formula, can definitely work. It can get them to the Western Conference Finals. They just maybe have to make some tweaks. You get some improvement from Ant, and you can maybe win a Finals. And I do still think that's a possibility, but I'm sure that the way this Western Conference Finals is going is giving Minnesota a little bit of pause about their future, which is already in a lot of question, because they have a ton of money tied up into this team. Next season alone, $44 million to Rudy Gobert, $50 million to Karl-Anthony Towns, $35 million to Anthony Edwards, $14 million to Naz Reid. You have $22 million tied up with Jaden McDaniels, and his contract goes for a lot longer. You're going to be a second apron team very quickly here, and you clearly need to make some type of upgrades if you're getting swept most likely in the Western Conference Finals, or even if they battle back, you're not playing well enough. You have to find ways to improve this team. The question is, how do you do that when all your money's tied up in these guys? And now you've got this big question mark that's popped up about whether or not this thing can actually work, because despite beating the reigning champions and sweeping the Phoenix Suns, you're getting dominated here on the biggest stage your franchise has played in 20 years. It wouldn't surprise me whatsoever if we get to the offseason, and a lot like last year, we hear some rumblings about Karl-Anthony Towns potentially being moved, or people debating if that's the way to go. I don't know if they do that, because again, it's the most success they've had in 20 years. They made the Western Conference Finals, but you do have to consider that when the window in this team may be short, with Gobert getting into his 30s, you have Mike Conley, who's 36 right now. Again, the money in this team is going to keep going up. Like, Rudy Gobert is extension eligible this offseason, so that's something you have to consider. He's going to command a lot of money, as again, he just won a DPOY. Like, Nickeil Alexander-Walker has been really good for you off the bench. You're going to have to pay him. Anthony Edwards is going to continue to rise up in his money. He's making $35 million next year after making just $13 this season. There is a lot to think about if you're Minnesota. Again, the season isn't technically over, but being down 0-3 in the NBA is basically a death sentence. It's the fault of a lot of guys, but easily the most disappointing aspect of this series has been Karl-Anthony Towns, and despite how successful they've been, this is going to lead to a lot of tough conversations again in the offseason, which sucks for a team that's had such a fantastic year. But yeah, we'll see if the Wolves and Cat in particular are able to respond in Game 4. I really hope they do. At least I hope we see a good showing from Karl-Anthony Towns, because I just hate that after it felt like shaking off all those narratives, he has just come back down to the Cat that we've known throughout his playoff career so far. And we'll see, I guess, what happens in the offseason when their season probably does inevitably end here in the Western Conference Finals. Also, I know I haven't talked a lot about that Celtics-Pacers series, mainly because the Celtics are just clearly the better team. I don't have a lot to really say about it, especially with Tyrese getting hurt. I think they're going to finish the sweep tonight, Monday, May 27th, as I'm recording this. So you will see a video talking about the Celtics making the finals after that, so be on the lookout for that if you're a Celtics fan or you just want to hear my thoughts on that series as a whole. That video will be coming out assuming it ends, or if the Pacers battle back, I might make a video too, because I know I haven't talked about that series as much. But yeah, for the moment, I appreciate you watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on future videos. And comment down below, what do you think about the situation the Wolves are in? Should they consider trading Cat to make the money a little bit easier, to build out a better supporting cast? Just maybe they don't want to be the team that pays him $50 million. If they do try to move off of him, who should they trade him for? Do you think I'm overreacting to this? I'd love to hear your opinions. Do you think the Wolves have any chance of coming back in this series, or is it over? But anyways, with all that in mind, I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Real one, say back.